Hello, everyone. I'm Christopher Ryan. I'm an advisor in the undergraduate admissions office, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're here with the faculty of the School of Journalism, as well as a few of my colleagues here. And to kick things off, of course, we want to answer all of your questions. We're going to keep this as conversational as we can, and we have one of our students, Brianne, here to moderate the chat for us and the experience. So first, I want to kick off with a quick poll. That way we can understand who's here and we can best serve your interests. So the first question, where are you in your academic experience? We have freshman through senior as well as transfer options. Second question we have is where are you from? So we have New York, outside of New York, and outside of the USA. And then the last question is, do you have a specific area of interest? We have journalism, broadcast, media studies, maybe you have multiple interests, and then perhaps onshore. We have a good mix, mostly seniors here today, coming in at about 73%, 27% juniors. Folks are still answering. And mostly New York residents coming in at 94%, and then the remaining 6% out of New York. And a good split. So we have multiple interests across in different areas, some in the traditional journalism pathway, and then about 44% onshore. With that being said, I'm going to kick it off to my colleague in the School of Journalism, Erica.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So welcome, everyone. My name is Erica Carp, and I coordinate recruitment and outreach for Stony Brook School of Journalism. I want to welcome all of you and our panelists today. But first, I want to introduce our moderator, Brianne Letta. So Brianne is a senior journalism major, minoring in history and environmental studies. She currently serves as the editor-in-chief of The Statesman, one of Stony Brook University's independent student-run newspapers. Brianne is also a member of the School of Journalism Student Advisory Board. And in the past, she has interned at the Fire Island Chronicle, Royal Media via the Dow Jones News Fund, and WSHU Public Radio, which is an NPR affiliate radio station. So I want to say welcome, Brianne. Thank you for moderating our faculty panel today, and I'll hand it off to you.
Of course, thank you so much for introducing me, Erica. So I'm just gonna start off and ask a few questions of our professors here. If everybody could just tell us, introduce themselves, name and title, how long you've been at Stony Brook, and the classes you teach. You can start with Barbara or Professor Sullivans.
Okay, that's fine. Hi, I'm Barbara Selvin. I'm an associate professor. I've been with the School of Journalism since it started in 2006. And before that, when there was just a journalism minor at Stony Brook. So I've been teaching at Stony Brook since 2000. I'm an associate professor, as I said. I'm also the director of Internships and Careers. I teach a variety of reporting classes, and I teach a class on the economics of the news in the digital era.
Professor Riccioppo, if you could go next.
Hi, I'm Rick Riccioppo. I am an assistant professor of professional practice. I've been here since 2007 at the School of Journalism. And before that, I taught for 5 years at Illinois State. And before that, I was a news photographer. I worked in local news. I worked at C-SPAN in the production crew. I worked at a regional sports network. So I've done all kinds of shooting and editing from public affairs and politics to local news and sports. And I teach the broadcast journalism classes. I teach shooting and editing, and I also teach media law.
Professor Srinivasan, if you can go next.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. My name is Sri Srinivasan, and I am the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation. That means I'm focused on teaching and talking about innovative ways in which journalism can respond to everything that's happening around it, even before COVID, but after COVID, it's even more important. I have a background as the Chief Digital Officer of New York City, and before that, Columbia University, and before that, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and always happy to answer any questions about tech, social, digital, etc.
And Professor Calvi?
He says he
Oh,
can't.
I couldn't unmute myself. Thanks for reading my lips. I already did. Thanks. So my name is Pablo Calvi. I'm an associate professor in journalism. I'm a journalist too. I write long form. I'm originally from Argentina. I did foreign correspondence in Bolivia, Brazil, and Argentina. I worked in Cambodia for a semester or so. And currently I teach sometimes multimedia, sometimes international global journalism, and with a focus on Latin American long form, so long journalism, magazine, and book form.
Oh, Pablo froze.
Am I still alive or am I frozen?
Good
You're
now.
live for me, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Professor Selvin, if we could just go back to you real quick. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your career in journalism and communications?
Yeah, sure. I forgot that part. So in another century, before I started teaching at Stony Brook, I was a newspaper reporter. I got my start at weekly newspapers on Long Island, where I mostly grew up. And I eventually worked at Newsday and New York Newsday primarily. So I covered business and real estate in the city for Newsday. And I still occasionally write stories, mostly about journalism for journalism websites. So I've been doing that in recent years.
And this next question, I just want to toss it out for any of our professors to answer. What do you feel makes Stony Brook University School of Journalism especially unique?
So I think that there's a couple of things. I think that we have amazing students and a very diverse body of students. Nobody, and I think I include here the professors, grew up with silver spoon. Everybody is a go-getter and everybody is very driven. You going to be surrounded by people who want to accomplish good things, and we are really happy to give you the tools to do that. And I think I speak for everybody here in the faculty, and of course administration, etc.
Again, echoing what Pablo said, I think we have wonderful students, really driven, hungry, eager, enthusiastic, smart. And I think we all feel like it's a real privilege to teach our students. We also, I would like to say, have a great faculty that I'm really proud to work with, accomplished, caring, very much hands-on. So I think one of the things that sets us apart is that even though Stony Brook is such a big school, the School of Journalism is a small community within that. Our students get very close to each other. There's a strong alumni network. There's a lot of support for students from students, and faculty get to know all the students, which I think is terrific. And we also have, I like to say, a strong internship program. And we have our students are doing well in finding jobs and moving along in their careers, even now.
I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that question before we move on to the next one. Mm-hmm.
I'll just say that I had not taught undergrads before. I taught at Columbia Journalism School for 20 years, all graduate students. And so it was really eye-opening to come here and see the extremely high quality of our students, the size of the classes. I'd always been told about how big undergraduate classes are. I didn't study undergrad in America, so I was expecting to teach huge classes and was really surprised at the quality of the students, the size of the classes, and the quality of our colleagues, just the broad range of work that they've done, and the amount of energy and insights they're able to share with our students. So it's a great experience, and I'm very glad that I'm here.
Professor Riciopo, would you like to add anything about what makes a school journalism unique?
Well, I think my colleagues covered it, but to me, it really boils down to two things. Number one is what Professor Selvin was mentioning. We have a very small, intimate school. It's not tiny, but it's small enough that you will be known by name when you go down the hall. Your professors will know you by name. So I think that's kind of cool. And I mean, just speaking from my own personal undergraduate education, not many of my professors were practicing in the field. Most of my professors were academics. They went from undergrad to graduate school. They got their PhD and they started teaching. And what you'll find, at least with us, is everyone has worked professionally. And we won't teach you out of a book. We'll teach you, what we learned, what we had to do to get by in the professional world. So I think those two things are what stand out to me.
As a student, I can confirm all these things. The next question I have for anybody is, what kind of advice would you give to a student journalist who's just starting their career in college?
I'll jump in with that one. I think getting involved in student media right away is a really great way to boost your career. And I don't say that Brienne did that. And now she's the editor-in-chief of our campus weekly newspaper. But if you get started early, you get clips early, you get internships early, and you develop those networks and that you will count on for the rest of your life, and as long as you stay in journalism, and even just as for friends. So it's another small world within a world of the larger world of Stony Brook. So that and internships and student media are the two things I think are really important and enhance your academic career in journalism.
And Professor Selvin, if you don't mind, if I follow up on that, you're the internship coordinator for Stony Brook University's School Journalism Department. Could you tell us a little bit about internships with the school journalism?
We have relationships with a lot of different news organizations on Long Island, in New York City, and elsewhere around the country. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have the director of one of the largest internship programs, national internship programs, the Dow Jones News Fund, is going to do a virtual visit for our students to talk about internship opportunities. We've had many students go through that competitive and prestigious program. We've had interns at television stations, television networks, CNN, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and weekly papers on Long Island, some very fine weekly papers, especially on the East End. For students who come from off Long Island, or out of the New York area, out of New York State, a lot of students are doing internships in their hometowns and other places around the country. So we have good relationships with recruiters at major newspapers and small organizations and websites and TV stations and all kinds of places.
If I may add, that's also, I mean, it's a structured position that Barbara has assumed. So it's not something that is a random occurrence that somebody gets an internship. It's embedded in your curriculum. So you will have to be at some point interact at a professional level as an intern. Depending on your interests, right, and your capacity, but that's incorporated into the program. It's not something that you do on the side. Sorry.
Yeah, and we have a lot of support with resume workshops and resume writing. Shri is on the internship committee with me, along with a couple of other professors in the school. We have internship fairs virtual this year, but usually in person. And I send out emails pretty regularly with opportunities and information about internships and careers, both to our students and to our alumni.
And students also get, I know that when I was a sophomore, I took Journalism 320 with Professor Calvi, and I got a lot of clips through the Osprey. Do you think you could tell us a little bit about the reporting work that you do with students in Journalism 320, or rather just the Osprey, I guess now?
Sure. So basically, there's a lot of accumulated knowledge at that point. You know, you've been learning for at least a couple of years how to report an interview, and this kind of creates a more or less regular setting based on a publication through which you channel stories that you're producing on a weekly basis. And those stories are accompanied by multimedia elements that we learn throughout the semester, and we add to the mix, right? So at the end, even though it's not a technically, I mean, you don't need to be a programmer to take the class, but at the end you will know some rudiments of coding, video shooting basics for web. We were using slideshows and audio pieces. We were working on audio pieces too, on some infographics, right? But everything is geared toward publication, and ultimately those stories are live. And we had a number, I think that we reached at some point, like I don't know if it's much or not, but about 30,000 unique viewers a week, which, I mean, we're a student run publication, I mean, a student professor run publication for a class, but it was clear that we were filling a void in some sort of a news desert, because as much as Long Island is close to New York, it doesn't many times have the proprietary coverage region by region and county by county. So we were providing a service to people who, you know, heard about us, or people who heard about us through the people we interviewed and we talked to. So at some point we were having some interesting following, and people wanted to advertise in our publication, which never happened, but people were showing some interest in it. And I think that, you know, in terms of how we connect with our surrounding community, I think it was a great experience, because like it made many of our students who had been reporting like on campus venture outside of campus and have basically preliminary experiences compared to what they would have if they were working on a publication like on Long Island, for instance, right?
And I just wanted to add that I read some of the articles that the Osprey produced last semester when everything went online, and everything. There was some really great reporting there. Could you just add a little bit about how it's been operating during COVID?
So we had to shift to remote teaching and learning during COVID. So we had to adapt. Many of our reporter students went back home. So instead of focusing only on Long Island, we had to open it up to the different parts in the country where the students were located at the time. So of course, like following every prevention, like, you know, advisory, etc., we pursued our reporting. And I think that we had a really terrific second part of the semester. We were publishing stories from Vermont. We're publishing stories from California, like from all places, a lot of places around the all over the country. So it was kind of a very strange experience because we are not a national publication, but we did learn a lot about things that were happening everywhere. And it was a really interesting experience for the students too. I think that, I mean, I like the workshop style format, and I think that it is that remote teaching. In this case, in particular, I think that it helped students produce things that they cared about more. I think because they were like close to their origin and their place of origin. So I think that that helped trigger a new interest in reporting, and it was a good batch of stories.
And the school of journalism does offer trips. They put together trips to go abroad and do reporting. I know in the past they've gone to South Korea and Cuba. Professor Rusiopu, I wasn't sure if you could elaborate a bit about Journalism Without Walls.
Sure. Well, we've been to a lot of different places, not just Cuba and South Korea. We've been to India. We've been to Istanbul. We've been to Russia.
Ecuador.
There's been other places, right? Barbara?
Yeah, Kenya.
So what we try to do is, like, we don't go to touristy areas. We try to put together a trip that gives the students the opportunity to do some really meaningful reporting. And it's an amazing experience. We basically take students to a foreign country. We prep them ahead of time so that when they land on the ground there, they have some background in the history and the politics and the culture and the economy and things like that. But then we send them loose and ask them to go out and find interesting stories. And it's super beneficial to the students because number one, it gets you out of your comfort zone. It forces you to do things that you probably didn't even realize you could do. So it gives you a tremendous confidence boost in your abilities when you come back. It's like, wow, I really can do that. I mean, if I was reporting in a foreign country where I don't speak the language and there was no internet and no cell service, well, now going to a school board meeting, that's going to be a piece of cake. So it really gives you a tremendous amount of confidence. It lets you find out, like, not only what's going on outside of the world, outside of our region, which is really important, but it gets you to recognize some of your own skills that you might not even realize you had. It's a tremendous opportunity to get some good clips for your reel and good articles published. It helps you stand apart from the competition when you graduate and you're trying to find a job. I mean, imagine if you were a recent college graduate and you're trying to get an entry-level job in a newspaper or a TV station, and you know, you're competing against a lot of other recent college graduates, and they may be having clips from, you know, a local fire, the school board, things like that, which is good reporting, but you're going to be showing a clip where you're doing a stand-up from a different country. So it makes you stand out. So there's just so many benefits. I mean, every time I've been on one of these trips, I've never had a student come back and say, oh, that just wasn't worth it. I have had students come back and say that it literally changed their lives. And I'm not even exaggerating. One of my students went on our first trip to Cuba, and he was so taken by it that he decided, you know what, I really want to make my life's work understanding and facilitating the cooperation between Cuba and the United States. and he went and got his master's degree in Cuban studies, and has been working in Cuba as a tour guide and facilitates all these great interviews. We've used him now on 2 occasions going back to Cuba as our fixer. And he has amazing contacts and gets our students to meet really fantastically interesting people. And he said it literally, going on that one trip literally changed his life. So it's a tremendous opportunity. I would encourage any student to go on an international trip if they could. It's really, really beneficial.
And I would also like to talk about Loeb Enterprises. I know a few students who have had some exciting internships there. Professor Srinivasan, could you tell us a little bit about opportunities and what kind of mission this company does?
Sure. So my title is Marshall Loeb Innovation Professor, and that is the Loeb, L-O-E-B, is the Loeb NYC, which is the updated name of Loeb Enterprises, the company that sponsors both my visiting professorship as well as the internship, set of internships that they offer for students. And this is a company that, think of it as a startup accelerator or startup incubator that has more than 30 companies of all kinds and various fields, and they are looking for students to be part of the team to work on projects as interns, and to focus on things like SEO or writing or copywriting, things like that. This summer, so that's during the school year. And then separate from that, they also offer internships for the summer. And one of our students in the virtual world was able to do a terrific internship with an organization in San Diego that's part of Loeb Enterprises. So that was a lot of fun for our students. So these are just examples of reasons why you would come to Stony Brook, just to have this array of opportunities beyond just kind of traditional news organizations, but other places that are doing interesting, innovative work, just the way news organizations are. Other organizations are trying to do journalistic-like things, so that's another opportunity. And then what I love about Stony Brook is that you are not too far from media capital of New York, but you're not in New York. I think that's an advantage. You're able to focus on Long Island for your reporting, but when you want to go out and do an internship or meet people or go to companies, all of that you can do out of Long Island. So you're not too close and not too far. I like that mix for students.
And I think this came up earlier. Could you talk a little bit about Virtual Professional Fridays?
Yeah, so we have a program called Professional Fridays where we take students into the city to meet editors, producers, reporters, just to see what's it like inside a newsroom. And now, because it's virtual, we are doing them virtually. We just did a session with CBS New York where we met 2 anchors and one of the top newsroom leaders behind the scenes, and the students got to ask questions. They showed us around. And that's, again, the idea that the people you're meeting in the classroom as professors that you meet, and the adjuncts and the New York area, the whole New York area, there are so many people who are professionals who can help you in your careers. A lot of other schools, you'll find that the professors haven't been in a newsroom in many years or ever. And here you'll find the percentage of people who have that kind of experience much higher than in other places. And I'll just brag on Pablo for a minute. Pablo was my student at Columbia Journalism School a few years ago. Pablo, we won't say exactly how many, but he—
Not too long ago, you should say.
Yeah, not too long ago. And he then he came with all this great experience as a foreign correspondent, as a reporter, won our award for best student in our class, and then went on to get a PhD. And so having professors who may have PhDs, but who also have been in the field, reporting, storytelling, executing stories, that's really important. And that's one of the benefits of being here at Stony Brook.
we have a few questions from the audience that I'd like to throw out there. Someone just asked, what do professors in the School of Journalism look for in a mentee, and what qualities do they look for in young journalists?
Well, I think we look for enthusiasm and energy and being hungry, really wanting this. Journalism is great training for a huge range of different careers. Journalism is learning to write, learning to think, learning to research, learning to talk to people, to ask questions, to get the information you need. Those are skills that are transferable to any kind of career. In journalists, we look for that extra desire to be a storyteller. That really is, or just to find things out, that curiosity, that hunger to know things. I think those are the things we look for in young journalists.
Another question from the audience asked if you guys could possibly talk about the experience that the School of Journalism is looking for in undergraduate applications. And they also asked if students can double major or minor in journalism.
So can I jump in here actually when it comes to application? So just to make sure that all of our attendees are aware, the School of Journalism does not have a separate application process. Your application goes through the university, so you apply, and if you're admitted as a Stony Brook University student. That being said, if you're applying, make sure that we know that you're interested in journalism, that that this is a passion of yours. Make sure that that's included in your resume or activity record, in your essay. But I just wanted to be clear that, there's not a separate application procedure through the School of Journalism. But yes, you can, was it major, minor, or double major and minor in journalism? Both are options. And I think actually Brianne, she's not a journalism minor, but she does have 2 other minors. So she's a good example of students exploring other interests. And if our professors want to talk about maybe some of their experiences with students who have other passions or other areas that they like to study.
I have a number of cross students with Latin American studies, for instance, people who are interested in the region in say at a cultural level, or because of their studies in political science, etc. And some of my classes touch on Latin America, and we go to Latin America too many times, as Rick was saying. We went to Cuba, Ecuador, etc. So that is a constant for my classes, and we don't cover the same things. We don't cover, we discuss some of the same topics. The angles are slightly different, right? The point of views are slightly different.
I see there's a question here from Alana about how many minors you're allowed to have, the maximum. I don't know if there's an actual maximum. I think the maximum is how long you want to stay in school and how much you want to pay to keep going to school to finish all the requirements for minors. I have known students, I did know one student who had 2 majors and 3 minors. She was pretty unusual. I would say, based anecdotally, the most common double majors that we get, which would probably also be the most common minors, are political science and sociology, some English, some psychology, as Pablo was saying, Latin American studies. But we've also had physics majors, double majors in physics and journalism. I remember one engineering major, those math skills, of course. We've had computer science and journalism double majors, which is really great considering what's happening in journalism with, digital skills. We have, I know Brianne has an environmental sciences minor. We have sustainability studies minors, a lot of business minors. And that's another all of those things. Journalism works with anything. So whatever you're passionate about, whether it's music or Spanish or, psychology, it is great. And as a matter of fact, I should mention that all of our journalism majors are required to either have a a minor, a double major, or what we call a concentration. We have 4 or 5 concentrations that are already set up, that with a wide variety of choices within kind of a multidisciplinary approach. We have diversity in society, we have science, health, and the environment, I think. There's one in public affairs, and I don't remember what the other 1 or 2 are. But people can also create their own concentrations from courses throughout the university if there's a particular way you want to pull things together. So a lot of options for satisfying your intellectual curiosity.
And what are some of the benefits of pairing journalism with another skill set if somebody was interested in a different major?
Could you repeat the question, Brian?
What's the benefit to pairing journalism with a different field of study?
Well, the level of expertise is increasingly higher, right? So exponentially higher. You can work on stories with way more nuance and knowledge, and you can find off the bat the things that are really interesting to you. One of the things about journalism classes is that many of us teach you techniques, but we don't tell you what to do with those techniques, what to cover. So if you already have an interest, I don't know, esports or the environment or Southeast Asia or anything, the classes that you're taking with us will help you craft, will help your craft and will help you advance your skills as a journalist. But you already have a sense of direction in terms of what you want to cover. You want to be a foreign correspondent in, I don't know, South Korea, or do you want to write long form in Brazil or from Brazil, or you're interested in the indigenous people. Like, we are not going to put your you're going to bring your interest to us, and we are going to help you, you know, like develop your career, journalistic career around those interests if you have them, right? So I think, I don't know if that answers exactly the question, but I think it's connected to it.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that we also have many students who are interested in fashion, in sports, in entertainment, and have gone on to careers as journalists in those fields. You know, there are all kinds of great stories that you can do that come from those particular interests, but incorporate lots of issues of, you know, we have our seniors all do a really terrific project that incorporate. Pablo is teaching this class now, and I've taught it many times, and Rick has taught it. It's a senior project where students have to produce a multimedia in-depth report. They spend the whole semester reporting on something. And they produce a written story, a visual or audio story, and multimedia elements, interactive elements. It's a really great thing to show employers when you graduate, that you pull together all these skills that you've learned over the years. But I'm just thinking back to last spring when I taught this class. A student did her senior project on the struggle of Black fashion designers to break into the world of fashion. And boy, did that turn out to be timely. It is huge in the light of, you know, she got that story published in the summer after the protests and the reckonings that were going on around the country were really driving a lot of interest in topics like that. And she had become an expert in it. So, you know, there's fashion, but it's a hard-hitting story at the same time.
Another student question for the panel. Somebody wanted to know if there's a journalism honors program, and if not, can undergraduates work on their own research projects with a professor?
I'm not sure. I don't think, Barbara, you can probably say this, like, you know, in detail how the program works much better than me. So do you want to jump in?
Sure, yeah. We don't have a separate honors program, but we do have an honors college at the university. Brianne is a member of the honors college, so she might be able to speak to that directly. And so the honors college requires an independent research project for the senior year. which journalism students often combine with the capstone project that I just described. And yes, there are plenty of other opportunities to do independent research in other fields as well as in journalism. We'd have independent study projects. I'm running one now that's related to the Black Lives Matter movement, looking at ways that journalism education could respond to the questions that have been raised.
Yeah, and I'm actually working with Professor Sullivan right now on my honors thesis, which I plan to merge with my journalism capstone project. So that's going to be a year-long process for me. Another question from a student is, what kind of studios and spaces are on campus? They want to know, I guess, if specifically about public radio, studios, podcasting booths, etc.
We have a lot of different spaces available for the students. We have a television studio. Inside our television studio, we have a booth for podcasting. So there's that. We have a newsroom. It also has a sound booth in it. We've actually produced shows from the newsroom, like election shows. We have an NPR bureau on campus, and in fact, on our hallway. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and that's not even talking about student media. So there's a lot of studio space available.
And our last question, a student wanted to know if they have to choose a concentration while they're applying for, I guess, Stony Brook.
No, you can do that when you get here. And it can be a concentration, or as I said, it could be a minor or a second major. But we want all of our students to have, in addition to the skills and the history and the law and the ethics of journalism that we study, we want them to also have what Pablo was describing, a content area that they go into more deeply to create a framework for their reporting based on their interests. And I was also just going to say something about what Rick was saying about facilities, which was the equipment that we have. So maybe Rick, you might want to talk a little bit about the equipment.
We have a lot of equipment available for student use. Everything from, well, first of all, our facilities, we have a newsroom that has really top-notch equipment in it. It's all Mac computers with dual screens. We have every software that you could need. So, it doesn't matter what you want to do, you could do it in our newsroom pretty much. As far as cameras, we have everything from DSLR cameras, high-end DSLR cameras that shoot pictures and video. We have small point and shoot video cameras. We have professional grade video cameras that shoot in high def, literally the same kind of cameras you would see being used in the field. We have audio recorders. And a lot of this stuff is available for use by the students depending on what class it is. Some classes you get a semester long loan of a piece of equipment. In other classes you might, we may not have enough high-end video cameras for every person in the class, but we certainly have enough that it is rare that there isn't one available to check out when you need it. And we allow students to check out cameras, overnight, weekends, that kind of thing. So I can tell you that the equipment that we have is pretty top-notch. I know that, when I was an undergrad, the equipment was not very good. And it was nowhere near the professional grade. But I can tell you that the equipment that we have is very similar to the kinds of cameras that you would be using professionally. There's not a big learning curve from when you leave Stony Brook to work in a newsroom someplace. We work very hard to make sure that all of our gear is well maintained, and we try to make sure that that we're sending students out with the best equipment that we can possibly get our hands on, and we try to maintain it and keep it in good condition.
And can I add one bit, Rick? We also have amazing, like, really good access to software, like all the Adobe Suite. Sometimes, I think we have a couple of computers with other programs like nonlinear editing for I think Pro Tools is at least in a few laptops. So we have good access to good software, and we are updating the software frequently. And an added value is that right now, for instance, my students at 490, the capstone course, who need access to the software remotely, they do have it, because we also have the capacity to connect your laptop remotely to the laptops and the computers in the lab, so you can actually work and edit synchronously and remotely from your home if that's necessary. So you would have access to all the software in your living room, basically.
Yeah, and if I could just add one nice thing about like our newsroom, is that, well, right now things are a little bit different in times of COVID, but under normal circumstances, you have, as a student, you have 24-hour access to the newsroom. So you can, your ID has a magnetic strip on it, and we activate that so it works on the magnetic lock of the newsroom. And you can go in anytime you want, as long as there's not a class going on at the time. But I mean, our students work nights and weekends whenever they feel like working on their projects. So you have that access to the newsroom, which is pretty cool.
That reminds me of a point I want to make to tie in with our first question about our students, or what makes Stony Brook School of Journalism special. Rick mentioning nights and weekends. A lot of our students work. Most of our students work, have jobs, part-time jobs. And I know that for me, and I think I speak for all of us, it just gives us so much admiration for how much they're able to bring to their studies with the other things that they have in their lives, and how organized they have to be to manage all the different responsibilities. But I think that is something that's important to know about our students, is that they work really hard.
And another student sent me a question about concentrations. Are students required to study all the concentrations, or do they choose just one?
Choose just one.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this back to Erica to wrap it up.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. This was a wonderful panel. I want to let all of our guests know that we would love to meet you in the future. You are more than welcome to follow up with us if you have any additional questions. And once we can all be together in person, you are more than welcome to come to Stony Brook and take a tour of our newsroom and TV studio. I look forward to the day where we can have class visits again. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I hope to meet all of you soon. And thank you for joining us. Thank you to our wonderful panel today. So have a good day, everyone. A good evening.
Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.